Was President Trump obstructing justice?
Possibly. I mean, it's certainly some evidence of obstruction of justice.
At some point in your mind, as you're writing these notes, have you shifted to collecting evidence of a possible crime?
Well, yes, in a sense. I continued to believe that there was force to the FBI General Counsel's argument that we're going to have to look at the president. You're inevitably going to look at his conduct because he's the head of the campaign.
That was just one of many revelations from James Comey's interview on ABC last night. So, of course, President Trump took to where else but Twitter to rant about former FBI director whom he fired. President calling Comey slippery, a slimeball, the worst FBI director ever, dumb, a leaker, a liar, and he went on. Now, this is just one of many things that apparently has angered this president.
Is Donald Trump unfit to be president?
Yes, but not in the way I often hear people talk about it. I don't buy this stuff about him being mentally incompetent or early stages of dementia. He strikes me as a person of above average intelligence who's tracking conversations and knows what's going on. I don't think he's medically unfit to be president. I think he's morally unfit to be president. A person who sees moral equivalence in Charlottesville, who talks about and treats women like they're pieces of meat, who lies constantly about matters big and small and insists the American people believe it, that person's not fit to be president of the United States on moral grounds. Our president must embody respect and adhere to the values that are at the core of this country, the most important being truth. This president is not able to do that.
And Comey also compared Trump to Tony Soprano, and that also apparently didn't sit too well at the White House. Take a listen.
You said as this was happening, you had a flashback to your early days as a prosecutor.
I had a flashback to my days investigating the mafia, La Cosa Nostra. The boss is at the head of the table, and we're going to figure out together how to do this.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange. And I don't do it lightly. And I'm not trying to, by that, by the way, suggest that President Trump is out breaking legs and shaking down shopkeepers. But instead what I'm talking about is that leadership culture constantly comes back to me when I think about my experience with the Trump administration.
All right, a lot to unpack here, and there's more clips I'll share with you in a second. Let's bring in our panel to help us. Joining us, Jeannie Zaino, professor of political science at Iona College, also senior advisor at the consulting firm Applied Techonomics. Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent also. And yes, a lot to get to. Before I get the overall, I want to play one more clip, and this is, I thought, an interesting answer from Comey, which was impeachment. Take a listen.
Should Donald Trump be impeached?
Impeachment is a question of law and fact and politics.
Well, you're a citizen. You have a judgment.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'll give you a strange answer. I hope not. Because I think impeaching and removing Donald Trump from office would let the American people off the hook and have something happen indirectly that I believe they're duty-bound to do directly. People in this country need to stand up and go to the voting booth and vote their values. And so impeachment, in a way, would short-circuit that.
All right. Jeannie, we'll get into whether or not he helped or hurt his case, but he's certainly selling books and getting eyeballs. More than 10 million people watched just last night this interview that George Stephanopoulos conducted. His take on the moral unfitness of the president and whether or not this shouldn't be so much of a political vote on the Hill, but it should be something that the public or the electorate gets to decide in a certain time. What were your takes as to where he was going last night?
You know, I still think that the most important thing he has to talk about is the meeting with Donald Trump where they talked about Michael Flynn and where the president tried to get him to back off the investigation. Almost everything else that he is going out and saying, I think, is his opinion, both as a former FBI director and as a citizen. But I think that is really the key, because that really does put the president in a very difficult position legally. And you know, I think he has a right to his opinion about impeachment. I don't happen to share that opinion. While I would hope people would go and always go to the voting booth and vote their conscience and vote their values and their morals, this is about a legal process that's taking place. And people likely aren't going to hold the president accountable until they see, rightly so, the evidence and what happens out of that. So
And
I
then
think
it
it's a
becomes
little
political
premature.
process,
And then becomes
to
the
Congress
political.
with the
There
vote.
was a lot of him seeming to try to have it both ways and make points that both sides would be able to take charge from and also take offense to.
And there were
without-
modified hangouts. I mean, we don't have time to play all the clips, but what he said about Loretta Lynch, and then also what he said about a host of other things, and his role or lack thereof in deciding the election and how bad he felt. I grant you all that. Do you think it moved the needle either way, or are camps so ensconced right now that everybody's already made their mind up that they already knew this guy when they voted for him in November of 16 or not?
I don't think it moved the needle much. I mean, one of the thoughts that I had as I was watching it is it reminded me of why so many people disliked Comey when he was the FBI director, and particularly when he was giving the Clinton press conferences, because he does sort of make it a lot about himself. And, I think the lack of bombshell coming out of this may actually help Trump in all of this.
Well, I don't know, in that I just felt, and I think most people, and I think Andrew's right, a lot of people don't like him. A lot of people bear grudges on both sides of the political process as to how he handled both Hillary and Trump and all the rest. But I think more people trust him than they do the president.
Oh, they certainly do.
And to the point of a bombshell, I just want you to think about for a second, the FBI director at the time, and now former, but albeit saying the following about the sitting president as it relates to that infamous Steele dossier.
How graphic did you get?
I think as graphic as I needed to be. I did not go into the business about people peeing on each other. And he interrupted, started talking about it. Do I look like a guy who needs hookers? I didn't answer that, and then I just moved on and explained, sir, I'm not saying that we credit this. I'm not saying we believe it. We just thought it very important that you know.
What was the look on his face?
He was very defensive and started going into a list of people who had accused him of touching them improperly, sexual assault, and how he hadn't done this, he hadn't done that, he hadn't done that.
And Kenny, in a latter part in the interview, Comey was asked, well, do you believe that this could be true? And he said, I don't know. It could be true. He didn't dismiss this as just urban fiction or whatever else. He had gotten to that point and obviously brought a lot of personal baggage, fired after all, and national TV by the president, and dismissively so. But he said, right into the camera, I don't know if our president of the United States was involved with prostitutes at a pee party in a Moscow hotel and is being compromised by the Russians. Think about where we have gotten.
Yeah, and this is what, to Andrew's point, makes me so uncomfortable with Comey. Talking about the president's looks, which he does in the book and in the interview. This whole discussion in this vulgar way of this behavior that may or may not have occurred
But
in
here's
Russia.
where I'll push back a little bit. I grant you, I thought he came off as petty. I'll play the bite in a second. But when he's asked, and he answers honestly, and remember, this he may have to testify again at some point here, that he credibly believes that there's a chance that there was legitimacy to that dossier. My God, what does that say as to where we are?
I do think he has every right to say could be legitimacy to that, but I think it's a far cry to get on national TV and talk like that to sell books versus if you're under oath and you have to do it because you have no choice. I just think it's incredibly undignified. The president has been even more undignified.
Well, you have to answer the question.
It's just an ugly scenario.
The bite that Jeannie's referencing for the audience that didn't see it as we talk about this, Comey's impressions of meeting the president and some observations he made about his appearance.
He had impressively coiffed hair that looks to be all his. I confess I stared at it pretty closely, and my reaction was, must take a heck of a lot of time in the morning. His tie was too long, as it always is. He looked slightly orange up close with small white half moons under his eyes, which I assume are from tanning goggles.
Petty. I don't think it helped him. But
he did get the question. I mean,
yeah, he did get the question, and he got the question before. And I know people feel.
Respond to the question by saying, "I think it's undignified for me to sit here and talk about the president."
But I don't think it's undignified for him to answer what started this whole conversation. Trump, if you believe Comey, asked him to make the thing go away with Flynn, and then obviously he, as he should have, the FBI director had to go to the president and say, "There's a report out there that could have compromising information. I want you to know about it, so you don't read about it in a third party."
I mean,
and the fact that he finds that to be plausible, if not possible, is...
Yeah, but so does everybody in the country, and that's the problem here, and that's why I think I was so steamed.
He had access,
but that's why I was
that's
why I was so steamed from the interview last night, because his answers, particularly about that stuff, was the same stuff that's all over my Twitter feed or all over my Facebook page, because there's only 5 people who know the answer, or maybe a few more, but the former head of the FBI would have more insight into this, so share some of that insight with us.
But there is
so
an
we have a
ongoing
better
investigation.
idea.
He couldn't answer the question about obstruction.
But based
that's
on what
the
you've seen
problem.
so far, did you get the sense, or is it your opinion?
Well, that's the problem.
I mean,
he legally couldn't answer questions of things that are relevant,
Obstruction,
and
most
so
notably,
he's
yep.
talking about these superfluous things that to me, it left me empty and sort of discouraged and disgusted by. And Donald Trump is doing the same thing. Donald Trump is selling more books for this guy than this guy is selling.
In the court of public
Just like
opinion,
you
you
did
only
with
get
Michael
so
Wolff.
many bites at the apple when it comes to going after Trump, because at some point it'll be the boy who cried wolf. And this is one of those bites at the apple. And I know it's not necessarily Comey's fault.
Fair point. But don't you think, because of how quiet and the absence of leaking from the Mueller probe, that when the report finally comes out, people don't know what Mueller's voice sounds like? And that, I give him a compliment. And none of the other 19 prosecutors that are working lead on this case, you haven't seen a picture other than when I show
Except
a full
Comey
screen.
would have a better idea of at least the tracks that Mueller was going down than the rest of America would. And since we basically got from Comey a regurg of what we've already heard before, I mean, this felt like a bit of a wasted opportunity if getting rid of Trump is the goal.
It's not about informing us about anything that's relevant. It's about him making money. Bless his heart. He can do that, but I think it really sells himself and his position short.
You're both right. I just found it shocking, the conversation I was hearing about my sitting president.
But
and again,
we're
as
there
much as an
already.
egomaniac or a healthy ego that Comey might have, he is more credible by every single poll than the President of the United States. And that in itself
We're
says...
15 months into this administration. This is the normal that we've absorbed at this
You know
point.
what? Sadly, that might be the worst
it's
indictment of it
shocking,
all.
It's surprising, but it's normal.
Let's bring this thing closer to home. And on the other side of the break, Democratic primary for New York governor just got a lot more interesting. Cynthia Nixon, she got an endorsement, and that's got Governor Cuomo flexing his political muscles. We'll explain.